Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Overwatch Weekly. This week is meaty and beefy. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, so we are going to talk about a few stories this week, but they're all really big. So we're going to jump right into it. The first thing is a set of patch notes for the PTR from January 9th, so last week. Mostly all hero changes. There's a couple custom game options, but that's not that big of a deal. We're going to jump, though, into the hero updates. The first is to Baptiste, who had his immortality field maximum duration reduced from 8 seconds to 5 seconds. His immortality field cooldown increased from 20 to 25 seconds, and the amplification matrix ultimate cost increased by 20%. This is a big nerf to Baptiste, though it is a needed nerf. Weakens immortality field, which is good because that was way too strong. Amplification matrix gets harder to get because you got it way too quickly. I think these are good changes for Baptiste. I think his cooldown maybe should have been done where it was, it started after it was destroyed, but this is a good enough change as well. It's basically like a 30-second cooldown. Well, I guess not really. It's still a 25-second cooldown, but you don't have it for as long, so it'll feel noticeable. May's endothermic blaster slowing effect now reduces enemy movement speed from 20% to 70%, down from 30% to 90%. I can't talk today. I'm tired and it's early. And the slowing effect duration was reduced from 1.5 to 1 second. So, May, not as powerful anymore. Diva's booster's cooldown was decreased from 5 seconds to 3 seconds. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff because of that, so I don't know how I feel about that one. Orisa's fortified damage reduction was reduced from 50% to 40%. That's a nice change. It makes Orisa not as strong when in Fortify. And then Hanzo had his primary fire maximum projectile speed reduced from 125 to 110. And this is a very, if you don't understand how this works, basically, the way Hanzo's arrows work is there's a base speed of 25. So if you just like click Hanzo without charging with his arrow, it'll fire out with a base speed of 25. And for how long you charge up the shot, another bonus is added on top of it. So the way it worked before was you had 25 plus 100 times the charge for a total maximum speed of 125. Which is weird because that, to me, 25 plus 100 times the charge, that would just be more than 125. But I guess it just maximum is 125 because I guess the charge is 1. Anyway, and then now it's 25 plus 85 times the charge, and the max speed is 110, and that's the value that it was before the Hanzo rework. So it's just kind of a reversion on what we had before. And the final change is Doomfist, whose uppercut recovery time was increased from 0.2 to 0.5 seconds. So some good changes there. Some nerfs to some heroes who are pretty strong. So I don't have any issues with what they did. We're going to move on to a response to the forum post we talked about last week with Josh No when he talked about power creep and that people had a pretty negative response to it. And here is his reply to a post which was called "Today's Dev's Response to Power Creep is Heartbreaking." I also want to note that the forums are, when I'm recording this video, they are not really working. I can't view a lot of posts and whatnot, so I don't know what's going on with the forums right now. So bear with me if things seem a little odd, because there are some weird things going on here. But Josh No replied, "Thanks for trying to clarify this. I'm definitely hearing a ton of feedback over the last day, and I'm learning a bunch from this experience. I came to share my personal viewpoint, listen to the community, and try to make the game better together. I'm truly not attempting to callously disregard anyone's concerns and say everything is fine. I'm aware there are distinct increases in power across several aspects of the game, such as raw healing output, the introduction of new heroes and mechanics, or things like Wrecking Ball's extreme mobility. I don't think this is inherently negative, as balance is relative across a large number of factors. There have also been losses of power, such as the recent barrier changes. The idea I was trying to express, and failed to, clearly, is that I don't personally feel like there is an unreasonable amount of excessive power creep that makes the core gameplay not feel like Overwatch anymore. For example, Goat's comp was getting in that space for me, not necessarily due to individual hero power increases, but from the combined synergy of the comp moving away from feeling like a shooter. That's his thoughts on the thing, which I think are interesting. I think that I never was of the impression that he was callously disregarding things. I've seen a lot of things with Josh Snow. I've seen a lot of interviews with him, and I've seen other forum posts from him. I don't think that that's the kind of thing that he would try to do. And that's why I think he just didn't write things very well, but that is that. Next is where we have the big meat of today's video. Jeff Kaplan had a very, very, very long post on the forum. I'm reading this right now off of r/competitive Overwatch because, as I mentioned before, the forums are a little bit messed up for me. I think they're just messed up in general. So I'm going to link to this, our competitive Overwatch post in the description until I can get onto the forums, and I'll try to link the forum post. So this may be a little off. I don't know because I haven't actually read the forum post. But I believe this is just a copy-paste of what was said. But this is in a thread about 222 and how they should try to do 1 tank, 3 damage, 2 support instead, or something like that. But just it was just a proposition on how to improve the queue times for damage players, and Jeff posted a very, very long post, which I think is very insightful and very interesting. And here is what he said. In early December, we were brainstorming ways to shorten DPS queue times, and the idea was proposed to try changing the role queue team composition to be 1 tank, 3 damage, and 2 support. Our matchmaking engineers did some modeling around queue times, expected behaviors, etc., and all indications pointed to an overall positive improvement to all queue times under a scenario like that. I don't remember if I mentioned this would be a very long thing. It's very long, so I may not read all of it, but there's a lot of really big stuff here that I want to focus on as much of it as possible. Anyway, back to what Jeff said. From a design perspective, we were reluctant for a number of reasons. Before implementing 222 role queue, we had done experiments with the team compositions being 1 tank, 1 support, and 4 damage. The playtests under a 4-1-1 comp were terrible. The problem was the solo support. As a solo support, you felt unable to keep the rest of the team alive. Added to that, at all times, you had 5 very aggressive players prioritizing you as the target every time. As soon as a support player on one side died, the entire team would fall like a house of cards. So when the idea of trying 3-2-1 came up, we were hesitant because of our poor playtest with 4-1-1, but we did something interesting in December, and I'm really proud of the team for sticking with it. Internally, for the past 2 months, we changed the game to be based on 3-2-1 compositions. When we queue for our playtests, we only get 1 tank per team for each match. We decided to, quote, live with it for December and January because we felt like the easy and natural thing for all of us to do is just say, this is different and here are all the problems with it, and dismiss the system. But by forcing the team to try it out and live with it for so long, it's challenged us to try to solve some of the problems that have surfaced. And there are a number of challenges. First, there's the issue of what players have come to call off-tanks. The biggest issues center around Diva, Zarya, and Roadhog. The current playtest of those tanks, if you're adhering to various metas that have existed, is to pair them with other main tanks. Obviously, if we were to change the distribution of roles from 2-2-2 to 3-2-1, it would require some balance changes, but possibly more than that. Roadhog is a great example. Is the correct thing to do for Roadhog under that design to try to make him more main tanky, or is the correct thing to do to simply move him to the damage role and balance him as a damage character? We've tried both in our months of testing. If you were to come and play Roadhog today with us in our 3-2-1 experiment, he's moved from the tank to the damage category. He only has 400 health. Take a Breather only heals and does not do damage reduction, and there were a bunch of DPS changes to his scrap gun. Now don't freak out, we're not doing this for 2-2-2, I am only sharing the design experiment that's going on here. Maybe a better direction for Roadhog under 3-2-1 is some sort of team damage reduction ability. How do you take what is essentially an off tank and make him a main tank? That is what we would have to explore with any of these tank characters. Since the tank roster is already one of the more limited character selections, we're obviously not crazy about removing the choice from tank players. And if our stated goal is to improve queue times, did going to one tank actually remove a bunch of otherwise tank players from the queue, or were some of these tank players actually damage players who wanted a faster queue time, so they picked Roadhog? Obviously complicated questions, and it is even more complicated to be confident in an answer. The other fear around a 3-2-1 composition is the importance it places on the tank player. In our playtesting, this has manifested itself in two notable ways. One, some players feel a lot of pressure to choose the correct tank. If there's only one tank, the team has a very strong option or opinion about who that tank should be. Another fear around this issue is that metas will be even more limited as players tend to take the path of least resistance towards their hero choices. If Reinhardt is deemed meta, do we only see Reinhardt from now on? Are we all mad at our tank players if they play the hamster? 2. Some tank players felt a tremendous anxiety about their performance in the match. They felt like being the lone tank put a lot of pressure on them, and if they died, it was a really big deal. Some of our tank/support players, who would occasionally play tank, stopped playing tank during 3-2-1 and only gravitated towards support because they felt intimidated to be the main tank and have so much focus on their play. Conversely, there are a number of main tank players on the team who actually enjoy the added spotlight. Traditionally, in video games, there are different personas that are attracted to roles in games: tank, support, damage, etc. We saw this in WoW, and we see it in Overwatch. While these are stereotypes, and you have to be really careful assuming too much here, there are many tank players who love being the lone tank and carrying the team to glory. Watching this play out in our weird internal experiment has been fascinating. Our support players have given mixed feedback on the experiment as well. On the negative side, people feel bad when the lone tank dies. On the positive side, many support mains have commented that they feel like they have more freedom to focus on other players and not just try to keep the big bags of hit points alive all match. In general, these matches are more chaotic and, I'll touch on this later, feel more FPS-y. The result is good or bad depending on the type of player you are. For some of our support players, this makes matches more exciting. Everyone is taking a lot more damage under 3-2-1. For some support players, the chaos causes negative anxiety and they prefer just healing tanks. The damage experience has been overall positive. For those of us, like me, who usually queue for all three roles, we're often pleasantly surprised to actually get to play damage. Also, many on the team have cited that with 3 damage dealers, they feel far less pressure than they do in the current live game with only 2 damage. Compositions have been really interesting. For example, you can have a 2 sniper comp, maybe Widow and Hanzo, and have a flanker like Genji and Tracer. It's really opened up the game. If you're evaluating pluses and minuses, it adds to the chaos, makes the gameplay feel more like a traditional FPS with less barriers and less damage mitigation going on, but also detracts a bit from team play. Speaking of team play, one of our testers who did not like the experiment made a comment that he felt like 3-2-1 detracted from team play too much. I found this fascinating because in 2013 and 2014, every decision we made was to embrace/encourage/force team play at all costs. We put so much effort into putting the focus on team victory/defeat rather than individual performance. But in 2020, I feel like the overemphasis on team play, while great for hyper-competitive players in situations such as Overwatch League, causes a lot of psychological pressure for your average player just looking to blow off steam in a video game. I guess what I'm saying is that in 2020, feeling like you can deviate from team play a little bit in Overwatch and have some success feels like a good thing, not a bad thing to me. The other analogy I've used, and I know you all hate my sports analogies, is that Overwatch, in its current evolved form, feels like a football game, American football, to me, where every match is 4th down on the goal line. The amount of team synergy and execution required to pull off a victory is exciting, but also a little intense. There's something nice about a more loose/skirmishy version of the game, but again, it's all opinion and perspective. Not everyone on my team agrees with me, and that's a good thing. The other odd thing about testing this is that when we started, everyone treated it like it was, quote, one of Jeff's crazy experiments, end quote, and was a super different, challenging, and possibly stupid idea. I tried to calm people down by reminding them that most of the matches in Overwatch history since launch up until the release of Role Queue were actually played with 1 tank or less. After a few of the early playtests in December, I remember one developer giving feedback that the game felt like old school Overwatch, like when we first launched. I tried to point out that the reason they felt that way is because we used to play the game this way all the time. It shouldn't be that surprising or different. Let's all remember the surprising thing back then was actually having 2 tanks. It's been a really interesting and fun experiment. We're not really confident that it's the correct thing for the game, It solves a lot of problems, but it also introduces a lot of problems, like most things in the world of game design. I'm really proud of the Overwatch team for experimenting with it for the past 2 months. We're really conflicted on it, so it was cool to see you bring up the idea. We'd love to hear your thoughts on and opinions on it. We've also been brainstorming if there's a way to bring this experiment to the community somehow, either through the PTR or the live game somehow. We don't want to freak people out though. Usually when stuff hits the PTR, we intend for it to go live or some version of it, but this is much more of an early experiment more than anything else. Anyway, thanks for proposing ideas like this. So that is the end of Jeff's thing. As I mentioned, very long, and so I'm not going to talk about anything else after this, specifically because of how long this is. But I really like what Jeff said. This is actually the first time I've read through this whole thing, so this is a first reaction for me. I'd seen some people talk about it before, so I knew some stuff about it. What I actually think is interesting is I was one of those people when Roll Q came out that I really, really, really wanted Roll Q. Less for tank play. I was fine if I was the only main tank. I prefer to play off tank, so that's why I didn't want to be the only tank if I was playing, because I want to be able to play Zarya or Diva, because they're the tank players I enjoy more. I'm not really a big fan of Winston or Roadhog or Orisa, or Winston or Reinhardt or Orisa. I just don't really like playing them that much. They're not that fun to me. Whereas I really like Zarya and Diva and Roadhog. I think they're more fun than the main tanks are. So I didn't like playing main tank as much. But I never felt like just playing one main tank was the problem. Where I always had issues before Roll Q was as a support player. When I was the only person playing support, it was very, very, very difficult to just do anything, because it felt much harder to function when you're the only support and there's all this pressure on you to heal all of the players on your own. So when you still have the two supports, but you can have 3 damage dealers, I think that's a much better change, and I think that'll make the game feel a lot better. I actually really like this idea, but I do think it is an idea that we would have to try out first before it went live. I think it's a very, very, very big change potentially, because I think you would see queue times change. I actually think it would be better in pretty much every way, which I really mean that. My one problem though is I think it would be weird to have Diva and Zarya and Roadhog, not so much Roadhog, more so Diva and Zarya, moved to a different role. But in a way, that is kind of what they are. You know, you kind of lower their health a little bit to make them less tanky, because they're not a tank anymore. And I think it would be a very interesting move. Diva's the interesting one, obviously, because she's in a mech. So would you really make a mech no longer a tank when she's got this huge mech that she's piloting? Would seem kind of weird as a damage dealer. But I think it could work, and I think it's really interesting to watch and to see. I'm curious to see if we get more out of this. I'd love to give it a try. I think it'd be really interesting to see, and whether or not we would actually see Zarya and Diva also moved into a main tank or into a DPS role, because I would think you'd have to. If you only have one tank, you're never going to run Zarya and you're never going to run Diva. Well, people might run Diva, but not at like the high level. But you're never going to run Zarya at a high level as your only tank, because Zarya doesn't have a barrier or anything. And I mean, you could say the same about Wrecking Ball, but I still think you'd run Wrecking Ball, because Wrecking Ball's job is just to kind of sow chaos and drop on people and do a lot of things to kind of mess people up. So I think it's a very interesting idea. I think it could work really, really well. I think it would be interesting to see what it did. The whole thing about like team play, like I don't love team play. I don't normally play with a mic if I'm playing quick play, and if I'm playing competitive, I'm not someone who's calling things out a lot. I'm pretty silent. I'll say things every once in a while if there's something that I feel like needs to be mentioned. If I say like, oh, you know, Doomfist's behind us, or this guy's behind us, whatever it may be, that's the kind of stuff where I will talk about that kind of thing. But overall, I try to not normally be super vocal, because I don't know how to do callouts very well. So team play for me is something that is important, but it's not the most important thing for me. So I think if the game moved into a much more FPS kind of fun way to go, I think it would work really, really well. And I think it would take some of that pressure off. Like when I play DPS, I'm really worried because I want to learn how to play Widowmaker. I want to learn how to play, well, I want to improve on Widowmaker. I want to improve on some of these heroes that I'm not very good at in the damage role, namely your Widowmakers, your Ashes, your McCrees, your Soldier 76s, none of those hit scan players, a lot of those hit scan heroes I'm not very good at. And I think it'd be interesting if there was a way to kind of take some pressure off where you have 2 damage dealers still. You have a Hanzo, or you have a Tracer, or you have a Doomfist, or a Genji, or whatever, and you can still have that kind of projectile or long-range hit scan DPS. I think it would be interesting to see. So I'm curious to see if we get more out of this. I think it would actually do really good things for the game, and I've been trying to follow some of the things on Twitter, see what people have said, and there's been some interesting stuff out here. Red Shell said it was one of the best ideas that he's seen. Some people like McGravy, who plays off-tank for the LA Valiant, said this 3-2-1 post got off-tank players shaking in their boots. So there's obviously different thoughts on it, and people are going to have different opinions on it. But ultimately, I think that it is something that would be interesting to see, and I am curious if we will officially get it in any capacity before we see anything else for it. But that's all I have for that. Like I said, very long video today, long post by Jeff, so I wanted to cover the whole thing because I think it's really important. But let me know your thoughts on it down below in the comments. I would love to have a discussion about this if you're a tank player or a damage player specifically. If you're a support player, I think the thing that changes the most is you're going to have to obviously heal a lot more, which I think might mean worse things for your Anas and your Zenyatas maybe, because they might not get played as much because their healing output's not as good, or maybe they still get more played, you know. I think a lot of AoE healing would probably be good, so I think we'd probably still see a lot of Moira and a lot of Lucio and a lot of Baptiste. Maybe some Pharah if it's a, you know, if you're running or maybe you have some Pharah Mercy every once in a while, but I'm curious to hear what role you like to play and how it would impact you. I play a lot of support. That's the role I play the most. That's the role that I feel like I'm the best at. And I've been playing a lot of Moira. I think Moira would still be really good here. I think that you'd also have a very good Lucio. Baptiste will be very good. Ana could do some good things as well with her bio nade. I've seen a lot of people say that what it should be instead of 3-2-1 is 1-2-2 with like a flex roll that you can run it whatever you want it to be. You can have another support, or you can have another damage or another tank, which I think that's just a little too complicated. It would add some kind of a more flexibility to the compositions, but I still think it wouldn't be that great because I think a lot of people would still run double shield for that one and they wouldn't do anything else. But I'm just curious to hear what you have your opinions on this are, so let me know in the comments down below. But that's everything I have for you today. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing if you want more content like this in the future. But I'm going to get out of here. So thank you once again. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.